This right here is what I would say bordering on cheap shot. Any moving screen looks like it could be a cheap shot. Caitlin Clark is playing defense. Brittney Griner lowers the shoulder and clocks her in the jaw. Like, she drops her shoulder and then turns it in. Like, that is the only benefit of the doubt, as seen by this one right here. The same thing. She turned her shoulder, except got someone in the chest on the screen, and it was given as a flagrant foul. I don't mind this being given as a flagrant because it is aggressive and she did drop the shoulder. This is somewhere between a offensive foul and a flagrant. 8 times out of 10 in this scenario, the refs are just not going to go to the monitor. But once the refs go to the monitor, you have to call it a flagrant foul.
Brittney Griner appeared determined to make life difficult for Caitlin Clark. The screens were physical. The contact was constant. The officials allowed a high level of physical play. For stretches of the game, Connecticut seemed committed to a simple approach: make Clark uncomfortable, make every catch difficult, and force Indiana's star guard to work for everything she earned. The strategy was straightforward. The outcome was not. By the end of the night, Clark had scored 25 points, made 5 3-pointers, controlled the pace of the game, and helped lead the Indiana Fever to another victory. What began as an effort to limit her impact ultimately became another example of her ability to perform under pressure. This was not unfamiliar territory for Clark. Throughout her basketball career, increased defensive attention has often produced the opposite of the intended effect. The more physical opponents become, the more aggressive she tends to play. The more pressure she faces, the more focused her game appears to become. That dynamic became one of the major storylines of the night. By the final buzzer, the conversation was no longer centered on the physicality directed at Clark. Instead, it centered on how she responded to it. From the opening minutes, Connecticut made its intentions clear. Every touch was contested. Every movement away from the ball faced resistance. The Sun were determined to disrupt Clark's rhythm and prevent her from getting comfortable offensively. The approach was understandable. When Clark settles into a game, she presents problems that few defenses can consistently solve. Leave her open for a moment and she can connect from well beyond the three-point line. Lose track of her in transition and she can create instant offense before a defense has time to get organized. Send extra help and she is capable of finding open teammates. Defend her one-on-one and she has shown the ability to attack. There are few easy answers. Connecticut chose physicality as its primary solution. The challenge with that approach is that Clark has spent much of her basketball life facing exactly that type of defense. Long before she entered the WNBA, opponents built game plans around limiting her impact. Defenses trapped her, double-teamed her, face-guarded her, and challenged her physically. Yet she continued to produce at a high level throughout her college career. As a result, Connecticut was not introducing Clark to an unfamiliar challenge. It was presenting a challenge she had seen many times before. That became increasingly evident as the game progressed. Rather than becoming passive, Clark grew more aggressive. Many elite scorers reach a point during a game where they stop reacting to the defense and begin dictating terms themselves. Clark appeared to reach that point early. A deep three-pointer fell, then another, then another. Each basket reinforced the same message. Physical defense alone was not going to be enough to limit her production. Her confidence remained intact. Her aggression remained intact. Most importantly, her willingness to continue attacking never changed. That quality helps explain why Clark has become such a difficult player to contain. Some players become more cautious when frustration begins to build. Clark often moves in the opposite direction. She becomes more assertive. She looks for opportunities to make bigger plays and take bigger shots. Connecticut felt that pressure throughout the game. Each time the Sun appeared ready to gain momentum, Clark responded. Each time Connecticut seemed to establish control, she found a way to answer. She continued reminding everyone why she has become one of the most closely watched players in women's basketball. At the same time, another topic began drawing significant attention: the officiating. As the game unfolded, fans focused increasingly on the amount of contact being allowed. Social media filled with clips, screenshots, and debates about missed calls, and whether Clark was receiving the same whistle as other star players around the league. Regardless of where people stood on those arguments, one fact stood out: Clark did not attempt a single free throw. For a player who consistently handles the ball, attacks defenses, and absorbs contact, that statistic immediately became a major point of discussion. Many players would struggle under those circumstances. Clark adjusted. If the whistle was not going to come, she would need to score another way. That is exactly what happened. She continued knocking down jump shots. She continued making three-pointers. She continued producing offensively despite the challenges presented throughout the game. The performance became a demonstration of a player refusing to let external factors dictate her effectiveness. As the game continued, the focus naturally shifted. Early on, much of the attention centered on Connecticut's physical approach. By the fourth quarter, the attention centered on Clark's response. That distinction mattered. One side was attempting to impose itself physically. The other was imposing itself on the scoreboard. In professional sports, production ultimately carries the greatest weight. The game's decisive stretch arrived as Connecticut attempted to make a late push. The lead was not secure. Indiana needed someone to settle the game and prevent momentum from shifting completely. Clark delivered. She did not respond with frustration. She did not respond with complaints. She responded with basketball, a timely shot, a smart read, an accurate pass, a sound decision, the types of plays that may not always receive the most attention but often determine the outcome of close games. That is one of the defining characteristics of elite players. When pressure increases, they simplify the game. They remain focused on execution rather than emotion. Clark continued doing exactly that. At the same time, Connecticut's defensive strategy began creating opportunities elsewhere. The Sun devoted enormous attention to Clark throughout the night. Defensive adjustments, rotations, and help coverage frequently revolved around limiting her influence. That attention created space for others. One of the biggest beneficiaries was Sophie Cunningham. As Cunningham began finding her rhythm, the balance of the game shifted. The defensive attention Clark attracted throughout the night opened opportunities across the floor. Connecticut found itself dealing with late rotations, open looks, and defensive breakdowns that became increasingly costly. Cunningham capitalized. She made important shots at important moments and provided Indiana with another source of offense when it was needed most. The Fever did more than withstand Connecticut's physical approach. They turned it into an advantage. The victory was significant not simply because Clark scored 25 points. It was significant because Indiana successfully used the defensive attention directed at Clark to create opportunities throughout the lineup. That is the type of basketball successful teams rely on over the course of a season. As the game moved toward its conclusion, another reality became clear. The effort to disrupt Clark was not producing the desired result. It was not affecting her confidence. It was not affecting Indiana's composure. If anything, the Fever looked increasingly comfortable as the game progressed. They appeared connected, organized, and confident. For Connecticut, that had to be frustrating. Teams that choose a highly physical approach generally hope to see visible signs that the strategy is working. They look for hesitation, mistakes, frustration, or uncertainty. Clark showed none of those things. Instead, she appeared increasingly determined. By the closing minutes, Indiana looked firmly in control. The confidence displayed by Clark after several key baskets became a talking point in its own right. Her body language reflected a player who believed she could handle whatever challenges the game presented. Those reactions resonated because they reflected what had unfolded throughout the night. Physical defense was not enough. Attempts to disrupt her rhythm were not enough. The pressure failed to change the outcome. Over the last several years, Clark has repeatedly shown an ability to perform in difficult circumstances. Pressure often seems to sharpen her focus rather than diminish it. This game provided another example. What makes the situation particularly notable is how often opponents continue returning to the same formula. Teams frequently believe additional physicality will provide the answer. They believe increased contact will slow her down. They believe making the game uncomfortable will eventually produce different results. Yet the outcomes often look remarkably similar. Clark adapts, Clark responds, Clark produces. As a result, the team attempting to make life difficult frequently finds itself searching for answers instead. At a certain point, repeated outcomes stop looking like coincidences and start looking like patterns. This game fit that pattern. The final numbers told the story. To 25 points, 5 made 3-pointers. A victory, no free throw attempts, heavy defensive pressure throughout the game. Despite all of that, the result remained unchanged. The performance highlighted not only Clark's talent, but also her mindset. Talent helps players succeed under ideal conditions. Mental toughness allows them to succeed when conditions are less favorable. It allows players to remain productive when contact increases. When defenses focus entirely on them, and when frustrations begin to build, Clark demonstrated those qualities throughout the game. That helps explain why many post-game discussions focused less on the physical play itself and more on how she handled it. The reality is straightforward. Many players can play physically. Many players can set hard screens and attempt to make opponents uncomfortable. Stopping elite players is a different challenge entirely. Connecticut never fully solved that challenge. Each time it appeared Clark might lose her rhythm, she answered with another basket, another play, or another important sequence. The result showed up everywhere. It showed up in the final score. It showed up in the box score. It showed up in the reaction from fans and observers. The strategy failed to achieve its primary objective. That is why the game carried significance beyond a single regular season victory. Teams around the league were watching. Coaches were watching, players were watching, analysts were watching. They saw a defense commit to physicality against Caitlin Clark. They saw substantial contact throughout the game. They saw one of the league's most discussed players face constant pressure. They also saw her finish with 25 points and a win. For opponents searching for a reliable blueprint to stop her, that is not an encouraging result. The game reinforced a reality that many teams are still trying to solve. Physicality alone is not enough. Frustration tactics alone are not enough. Intimidation alone is not enough. In many cases, adversity appears to bring out some of Clark's best basketball. That presents a difficult challenge for the rest of the league. Particularly as Indiana continues developing as a team, the Fever appear deeper. They appear more balanced. They appear increasingly confident. If Clark continues producing while drawing this level of defensive attention, Indiana becomes even more difficult to defend when other players contribute consistently. That is why the performance felt larger than a typical regular season game. It served as a statement, not through words but through execution. Connecticut attempted to bring physicality. Clark responded with production. Connecticut attempted to create discomfort. Clark responded with results. Connecticut attempted to disrupt her impact. Clark continued influencing the game in decisive ways. By the final buzzer, the conclusion was difficult to avoid. If the objective was to intimidate Caitlin Clark, it did not succeed. If the objective was to shake her confidence, it did not succeed. If the objective was to limit her influence on the game, it did not succeed. Instead, Clark finished with 25 points, another victory, and another performance that reinforced a growing pattern. The more challenges opponents place in front of her, the more effectively she seems to respond. Teams continue searching for weaknesses. Clark continues finding answers. This game provided another example of that reality. Rather than slowing her down, the pressure appeared to sharpen her focus. And that remains one of the most difficult problems any defense can face.